Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today I've got a brilliant serial killer thriller for you, All the Sinners Bleed by SA Cosby. So S.A. Cosby is, to my mind, the best crime writer to have emerged in the last 5 years or so. I think he's absolutely fantastic. He's published 4 novels so far, and I've read 3 of those, and I've had a brilliant time with all 3 of them. His first novel is the one that I haven't read yet, so that's My Darkest Prayer, which came out in 2019, which I think is kind of a gang-type novel. So I have that on my Kindle. I'm going to try and read it before the end of the year. After that, he published Blacktop Wasteland, which is a kind of a novel about a getaway driver trying to go straight but getting pulled back in again, which was brilliant. He then published Razorblade Tears, which is like a buddy novel about 2 dads whose gay sons were married and were murdered in a hate crime, and the 2 of them get together to try and solve that crime. And then All the Sinners Bleed, the book I'm talking about today, is his most recent, came out in 2023. And I don't know if this is deliberate with Cosby or not, but it kind of feels to me like he's working his way through the decade. So each of his books has a different, is identifiably a crime novel, a thriller, but digs into a different subgenre within the overall crime genre. So you could argue that gang novels like My Darkest Prayer are quite a kind of 1960s, kind of staple. That novels about getaway drivers, and particularly movies probably about getaway drivers, are a very 70s thing. The 80s revenge type stories are an 80s thing, and that serial killer novels and movies are a 90s thing. So I don't know if that's like a deliberate progression or if I'm just making that up, but that is a thought that occurred to me when I was looking at his back catalogue. So anyway, a really, really good writer, and a very good writer at turning in books that are the right length. So many writers nowadays, particularly of crime fiction, tend to write books that are kind of 500 pages plus long, which is often too long. All the Sinners Bleed, the book I'm talking about today, is about 340 pages, which is the perfect length for a crime thriller, in my opinion. And it's a really, really good book. So it's about a black sheriff in Virginia called Titus Crown, who's an ex-FBI agent. So he's left the FBI for various reasons, and has ended up back in his hometown, and is now the sheriff there. So he comes from a place in Virginia, I don't know if it's a real place or not, I suspect not, called Sharon County. And the book opens with him getting called to a school shooting in that town. And I would say the first few chapters of this book are phenomenal. They're really, really gripping. So it opens with, as I say, him getting called to this school shooting. He's been sheriff for a year, so it's the first anniversary of him becoming sheriff. And what Cosby does really quickly in those first few chapters is build up a bit of the kind of immediate history of the character, gives you a really good sense of the town, but also just really pulls you in with the mystery of what's going on. So this school shooting involves a kid that Titus Crown knows, who's the son of a friend of his, and the kid who's committed these shootings appears to have what may be a valid motive for doing it, and that's kind of the hook that pulls you into the story. And what develops from there is a serial killer mystery, as Crown realises that there's a terrible killer operating in the town, and really kind of embedded in the town, and he works to try and A, find all of the victims, and then B, put the pieces together and identify who the killer actually is. And it's a really great mystery, really well written as a mystery, but just incredibly suspenseful and gripping as well, and particularly in the first kind of quarter half, really, really disturbing as the details of what this killer has been doing come out. It's really, really hard reading, but I think setups like that, when done well, and this one definitely is well, really get you invested in justice, in the detective, finding the killer and bringing them to justice. And that the setup in this book is just perfect. The other thing he does really, really well is involve the detective's like private life in the book without it feeling like it gets in the way. So it feels like he does it with a purpose. So his girlfriend, previous relationships, his family, his relationship with his father and his brother all get pulled into this, but they all add richness to the story rather than it feeling like they're just there to kind of make up the pages. And also he does a great job of portraying this small town in Virginia, this county where these terrible things are happening, but where there is also a history of racism and ongoing racism. So there's a big subplot in the story about a statue of a Confederate figure, and the debate within the town, the arguments within the town about whether or not that statue should be pulled down. And I thought Cosby did this in a really good way in terms of like the sheriff, Crown, the main character, being caught in the middle between these two warring factions and trying to keep the peace between them, whilst appearing as much as he can impartial. Now, he's a black guy. I can't remember if I mentioned that in the review or not. So clearly he has his own views, but he manages to, you get that tension of the struggle of the role of having to deal with the competing opinions within the town in an even-handed way. So that in itself, there was some really good kind of suspense and tension as you see him kind of trying to navigate through that political turmoil, whilst also trying to investigate this terrible serial killer. And the themes of racism and the shadow of slavery are really well handled in this book, and really intrinsic to all of it. So thematically, as Cosby has done in his previous books, he manages to weave a message into the story and for that to be a very powerful message without it getting in the way of the story. So I never felt like he was kind of being preachy or anything like that. Everything he says makes sense. You get the message he's trying to put across, but it doesn't block the story. And all the characters act. You don't get characters, kind of spouting, spending pages giving their political opinions on things. He lets the actions and the story, weave that political angle into the book rather than, characters giving speeches and stuff like that. So I really felt that all the aspects of this book were very well put together. The politics, the characters, the setting, and the plot. And the plot is, fantastically gripping. So a really, really good modern serial killer novel. I did a video that went up yesterday, or went up this week anyway, about my top 10 serial killer books. And this was one of them. But I think it's an interesting modern take on the serial killer genre because it weaves in a load of other stuff as well. So it's not purely a serial killer book. It's a bit more than that. And as I say, I thought it was a fantastic read. I think my favourite Cosby book is still Roseblade Tears, which I thought was truly excellent. But this is very, very good as well. Definitely worth a read if you fancy a thriller, but be warned, it is very graphic and disturbing at times. So I hope you found that interesting. Do let me know in the comments if you've read SA Cosby and what you think of his work. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.